All right. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to all of you joining us for this really important discussion with Standing Together. My name is Adina Vogel Ayalon. I'm J Street's Vice President and Chief of Staff. I'm really pleased to be moderating this conversation today with Alon-Lee and Rula Daood from Standing Together. I'm going to give a brief introduction and then introduce our speakers and go back and forth with some moderated questions for our speakers. And I encourage all of you to put in your questions into the Q&A box in the chat, and I will do my best to either weave them in throughout the conversation or turn to them towards the end of the conversation to touch on, I'm sure, what are very important questions about the work that Standing Together has been doing prior to October 7th and since October 7th. I will say that we at J Street are truly inspired by the work that Standing Together does on a regular basis. We look at you as our friends, our partners on the ground that really stand up for the shared values that we all hold so dear. And you are very often, many of our viewers, I'm sure, have had the opportunity to meet you because you have been featured speakers either on delegations or at national events. And we know that our community is also inspired by you and the important voice and role that you both play and your entire movement plays within Israeli society. You have done incredible work recentering focus on empathy, the shared humanity, need for pursuit of justice and democracy and safety for Israelis and Palestinians at such difficult times. You have been very, very clear in your call for the release of hostages and end to the war in Gaza and the need to focus on creating a political horizon that sees an end to the occupation. You've been demonstrating and also taking regular actions and not only building that movement out in the streets, but making sure, to put actions to the words and to the shared values that we all hold. And I am just very thankful for the opportunity to bring your voices and the opportunity to hear about the powerful work that you guys are doing to bring together people at times of really deep anguish and pain. So thank you. Before I turn to you for questions, I'll just briefly introduce both of our speakers so you all have a sense of their backgrounds. So Rula is the National Co-Director of Standing Together. She is a Palestinian citizen of Israel, born and raised in a village in the north of Israel, and began her activism in her home city and later became involved in promoting Jewish-Arab partnership in shared Jewish-Arab cities. Before joining Standing Together, Rula was a community organizer organizing events and protests that drew hundreds of activists. Rula, thank you so much for being here. And Alon-Lee is the national co-director and founder of Standing Together. He got his start organizing Israel's first trade union of waiters in a chain of coffee shops and went on to found Israel's first national waiters union. Alon-Lee emerged as a prominent leader of Israel's social protest movement in the summer of 2011 and subsequently served as a political advisor in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. And together, Rula and Alon-Lee lead the national leading, the Israeli leading grassroots movement, mobilizing Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel in the pursuit of peace, equality, and social justice. So I'm going to start with my first question. I'm going to turn to you, Alon, for this first question. Alon-Lee, sorry. Can you briefly share how Standing Together came to be and how has it evolved since its founding, and a little bit about your theory of change?
Yes. Hi, good evening, good day, everyone. Very happy to join you in these tough times all the way from Israel. It's just before talking about Standing Together, it's been 9 months since this nightmare and this entire reality turned and changed and became the most impossible and saddening thing. And Rula and I are here representing the work that we're doing as a Jewish Palestinian grassroots movement, and it is extremely important for us to be able to talk with partners abroad, with partners that share with us our commitment to advancing peace and equality and justice on this land. So thank you very much for being here with us. Standing Together started, sadly, in yet another moment of violent eruption, escalation here on this land after the war of 2014, that was by then the toughest, deadliest war between Israel and Gaza. Of course, it is nothing to compare with what is going on right now. It was yet another moment of despair, another moment of, atmosphere where you couldn't run away from the feeling that everything is just flooded with death and sorrow and grief, and that the only horizon is continue to have the same reality. Just a few months after that, the war ended, and we had an escalation with the West Bank, what was named back then the Loners Intifada or the Knifers Intifada, a violent escalation of Palestinians in the West Bank. Jews were afraid to walk safely in the streets of Jerusalem. Palestinians were afraid to even go on a bus or the light train in Jerusalem because there were incidents of them speaking in Arabic and getting beaten up by people. And it was a moment of fear. And then Netanyahu said something extremely dramatic. He said, people often ask me, are we forever gonna live by our sword? It's a very famous sentence from the Bible. Le'olam nochal cherev. Are we forever gonna be living on or by our swords? And the answer to that is yes. That's his quote. And we decided, a group of people that were already discussing about the need and the lack of a movement, a public movement in Israel that is not an NGO, a professional NGO, not a political party, but actually a movement that can mobilize and organize people. We decided that this is a moment to try and mobilize Jews and Palestinians, Israeli and Palestinians together. And we called for a series of demonstrations started in Jerusalem with thousands of people coming to say, we will not agree to forever live on our sword, we will stand together. And then after a few demonstrations with the name Standing Together, we decided this is the moment to start a new movement, to try and speak about a different horizon, to try and speak about a message that almost none of the politicians promised us. A message of change, a message of living here with safety, living here with peace, living here in a way where people are equal, sharing the land instead of fighting forever on this land. And this is the beginning of Standing Together. And it's very deep theory of change is that in order to deal with those forces that are promising us just more of the same, more death, more destruction, more hatred, rivers of blood between the two peoples that are living here, we need to build power because they have a lot of power. They have a lot of resources. They have a lot of control over our lives, and we need to build power. And the power that we can imagine that we'll have in our disposal is power that is based on people. So this is why Standing Together's theory of change is to organize people, to mobilize people, and to find the common and shared interest between the Palestinians and Jews that live on this land, because we understand it exists. Of course, right now, Palestinians are paying the ultimate price for what is going on in Gaza, for the killing, the destruction. It's unfathomable, the reality there. But it will be wrong to assume that Jews on this land do not pay a price as well out of this reality. A price of living in fear, a price of violence, a price of getting killed on October 7th, or today. 2 people are severely injured right now, just a few minutes ago, in a deadly attack of missiles in the north. We pay a price, and both of the people share the interest to end this reality and to seek together a better reality with no occupation and wars, and with peace, equality, and independence to all.
Thanks, Alon-Lee. And just focusing on this post October 7th reality and the power that you are building for people standing together for a shared future, I imagine was even more difficult, right, to bring people together and to encourage them to see the importance of building that power at such difficult times. And so, Rula, I want to ask you about how did you organize in the immediate aftermath of October 7th? What were the actions that you focused on, and how did you continue to encourage people to stand behind that theory of change and that mission at such difficult times?
Yeah, well, First of all, thank you for having us and wanting to listen and hear and kind of understand what we are doing, how we are doing it, because I believe, we do believe our reality is in a way much more different from the reality of people who, are in the US or in Europe. Our reality is basically waking up every morning and not having the privilege to do nothing, but being basically living in a situation where we can't, it's either we choose to fight back, to organize, to understand how do we create a different political agenda and political power within the society we live in, or we simply leave. And because both of us, or everybody who's in Standing Together, believes that this is the home for all of us, nobody is leaving, nobody is going anywhere. And I think that is one, very basic fact that it's missing from the equation when people get into discussions that on this land that we call Israel Palestine, you have two people living. You have the Palestinian people and you have the Jewish people, and nobody is going anywhere. So I think from going from that principle and from that, understanding, it enables us to wake up each and every day and to continue with the fight. Although it's not an easy task to do in the place we live in, but I think it's been 9 months since the 7th of October, but what we are seeing is not stopping. The war, the bombing, the starvation, the killing, the hostages who are still in Gaza. The frontier, not just in the south, but also in the north with the south of Lebanon, is a daily life for all of us. What's happening in the West Bank is something that we all see and hear, and try to organize and understand what can we do. The 7th of October have deeply hurt many people. And when we talk about a joint movement, a movement of both Jews and Palestinian, both citizens who are living in Israel, we're talking about, a place or people who, in the same movement, we've had people who lost friends, a family to the attack of Hamas on the 7th of October. And we have people in our movement who have lost their families and relatives in Gaza by the Israeli bombings. So holding both of these sides in many ways, portrays the complexity, but also enables you to hold, your own humanity and the fight for what can we do and how can we do it. And for us, a day after the 7th of October, with everything that was happening, even 2 days after it, we understood that we have a huge mission. And we have, this huge, I would say, burden in some way, because we needed to understand how do we continue working as a joint movement, as a movement who is right now living in a war and under a war. And what we have done, the first thing we've done to keep our movement in a place that we would call healthy, is we gathered people in a Zoom talk on the third day of the attack, and then the retaliation of the Israeli government on Gaza. We had a Zoom call with our staff, with our leadership, and we gave a place for people to speak, so we can understand that what's happening is very big and huge, but also to give a safe place for people to share their feelings, to talk about their fears, and to understand that what we are going through is something that is shared to all of us. And from that point, it made it more possible for us to be able to speak a different message, a message that was very missing and unfortunately is still somehow missing from the political discourse within the Israeli public and the Israeli politics, that there is another way. We have seen our country launch countless wars on Gaza, and we have seen the same Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying again and again the same thing, that this time will be the time that we will eradicate Hamas. Hamas will be eradicated. But also, we see that we end up with the same policy, and the policy that to destroy Hamas, but making it, taking it to other side. Hamas only becomes stronger. And with each and every bomb that goes on Gaza, Hamas is becoming stronger. And we understand that in order to change what's happening, we must have, first of all, a stop to this war, a ceasefire. But not just this war. We need a political view, a political agenda that is very different from what we have today, an alternative that nobody is speaking to the people. We need to understand that in order to have any chance for both people living in here, there are other solutions, and it is possible. The first one is stopping this war, getting into a deal, but also stopping the occupation and ending the occupation on the West Bank and lifting the blockage on Gaza. And we're not talking about short-term solutions. We are talking about long-term solutions, because we understand that the only way that people living in Israel can get their safety is only when Palestinians living in Gaza and in the West Bank will have their freedom and their independence. And that is the voice that we shouted out very loud after the 7th of October. And we've been having, since the 7th of October, many events. At the beginning, we started by just asking people to come into conventions, to sit down, to speak, to bring a voice of a partnership, especially in these hard times. We had solidarity conventions. We had what we called de-escalation and solidarity within Israel. We had campaigns with our students in the campuses. We had support groups for the victims of discrimination and political persecution. We went on since then with huge campaigns calling out not just for a ceasefire and ending and putting a stop to this war, but also talking a very different language that nobody is speaking. We're talking about peace, about a real Israeli-Palestinian peace that can assure everybody who is living here solutions, safety, independence, and yes, prosperity to the people who are living here. And since then, we've been going on weekly demonstration for the last 7 months, each and every weekend in different places, in major cities, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, calling out for a ceasefire agreement, a hostage deal, and putting a stop to this war. And through these, we've been also trying to give what we call, or what's called in English, direct events. We try to go to the borders with Gaza to give, a fight against the starvation of people of Gaza. We called out for people to just bring food, and we took a truck and tried to go to the borders with Gaza in just attempting to, first of all, speak about what's really happening in Gaza, but also show that there is another voice within the Israeli society. And the last thing from the many things we've been doing, is the humanitarian guard. The humanitarian guard basically started and was launched due to the attacks of the settlers on the humanitarian aid that was going inside of Gaza. It was the people's way to try to stop extreme settlers who came to attack these trucks, and to allow these trucks to go safely into Gaza. And I'm glad to say that we were able, and we did succeed. And I think that was one of the most, actions that people really felt that they were doing something on the ground that was helping, because you could see that trucks were going through. So since then, for the past 9 months, we've been engaged in many activities. But the main thing with all of these is we are building, a political power within the society we live in, a political power that will put pressure to stopping this war, but also bringing solutions, political solutions that are not found right now in the politics of the Israeli government. And we believe we can do that with campaigns, with actions, and with trying to talk to the society that we live in. Because, and I will end with this, we do believe that, you know, the only way we can change what's happening here, and not just to stop this war. It's not about just stopping this war. It's about bringing a different agenda. We deeply believe that the only ones who can change this situation are us, the people who are living inside of the Israeli society. And that is why our main work is within our society to try and bring a different political agenda and a different political power that can put pressure and make a real difference into the lives of people living in Israel, Palestine.
Thanks so much, Rula. And just to add on to that, I think what you noted about the role of both the Israeli and Palestinian publics in essentially helping to craft this shared future and a reality that is not based off of conflict management and living on one sword, but actually, you know, conflict resolution. We at J Street, of course, very much see the role of regional players as well as the role of the United States in helping to support, you know, people like you that are working to help create that future. And I will say also, similarly, we believe that the first step right now in this very crucial moment is getting to a ceasefire and hostage release deal. And only then can we continue this process of building towards a reality of creating a comprehensive regional peace and security framework that is so desperately needed, and that unfortunately we are not seeing the Israeli government at this point in time even thinking about considering day after plans for what will be in the region. I'm going to incorporate some of the questions that we have from the viewers who were wondering about what it's like living right now within that current Israeli political climate, a political climate in which there is a government that is not supportive of the agenda that you are promoting. And so if you can talk a little bit about what that is like. Alon-Lee, I'll turn to you first, and then also who your partners are. And so Rula very wonderfully talked about one of the most, I think, well-covered actions that you took in terms of protecting humanitarian aid. And we all saw the horrifying photos of humanitarian aid convoys being attacked by extremist settlers on their way through the West Bank, and the role that you played in helping to protect and guard that aid, in addition to the actions that you took in delivering that aid. So what is it like in this current political climate in Israel? And also, who are your partners in some of these key actions that you are taking? Political and civil society partners.
I will start actually with a bit of the easier or less sad part of the political atmosphere. I will say that we are proud to have a lot of partners on the ground, online, people that are organized within movement organizations, people that are even in parliament. Just a week ago, we had a huge peace rally in a stadium of thousands of people, and we were managed within a group effort of 50 different organizations and movement to fill up one of the largest stadiums in Tel Aviv, and to have what can be only described as exemplation of might, of force, of showing that we are able to show that there is a peace and equality camp in Israel. So we are happy to work with organizations like Land for All, the New Israel Fund, J Street, and other organizations like Breaking the Silence and Women Wage Peace. I can name a lot, but we are cooperating on a weekly and daily basis with a lot of different partners, and there's an ecosystem. Even some people in parliament that I cannot say a lot of good things about the Israeli parliament at the moment. Cannot say that the Israeli parliament holds an alternative. I cannot say that people in the Israeli parliament are pointing towards an alternative, but there are some good people that we need to be able to strengthen and to cherish. Now, the second question, it's more complicated. Honestly, when you talk about the atmosphere right now in Israel, when you talk about the attempts of people, tens of thousands of people that are demanding change, that are trying to influence, that are trying to interfere and to advance the release of the hostages, the stop of the war, some sanity honestly, just some sanity on this land, you feel like we're in Russia, like we're in Putin's Russia or in Erdogan's Turkey. It feels as if the freedom of demonstration, the freedom of speech is on the line, maybe even way past it. It feels as if the right of families of hostages or either families of that lost other loved ones on the 7th of October, their right to say or demand or to act on the public sphere is being attacked by the government, by the police, that we need to say the police in Israel seems that it has fallen to Ben-Gvir, who has now full control over the police. And it seems that every week the violence against demonstrators by the police and by groups that are allowed to attack us with the police doing nothing is escalating every week. And though we are managing to mobilize tens of thousands of people to the streets for a few months now, and the movement standing together has grown massively, the protest movement has grown massively. It is not yet in the numbers of Kaplan and the anti-judicial whole protest from before October 7th, but still we have weekly, week after week, tens of thousands of people, and those people are being attacked. We're talking about also Palestinian citizens of Israel. And to those on this call that are not aware, 20% of all the citizens of Israel are Palestinians, are Arab Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel. They live in Tel Aviv and Jaffa and Jerusalem and Haifa. They live in Palestinian cities like al-Fahim and Nazareth and Rahat, but they are also the citizens of Israel. And they have lost the basic rights to even post online in Instagram or Facebook or Twitter empathy towards their own people. Saying right now, if Rula will say things that I will say as a Jewish citizen of Israel, Rula can sit on jail and I will not be arrested. We're seeing members of our movement, Palestinian members, that because of posting something saying, please God, spare the children of Gaza. That's it. A member of the movement got arrested by police officers. Her eyes got covered by the police. She was handcuffed and taken to the police station. Of course, she was released afterwards, but the damage has been done. And the fear is clear. And this is the atmosphere right now in Israel. And I think I can go on and on by explaining it, but it is escalating, and it is, I would say, just this sentence to end with. The attacks against democracy or the democratic freedoms that we saw before the war are now maybe not the main headlines in Israel, but they're coming in the back door. And they are being advanced by this fascist right-wing government as we speak.
Thanks, Alon-Lee. And, of course, I want to come back to this point about the pro-democracy movement prior to October 7th, the threats to democracy and the linkages that relate to threats to democracy and continuation of the occupation, and how your role and where you see that today post-October 7th. And of course, we very much relate to this concern regarding threats to our democracy with our own election coming up this November. And that is a huge focus of ours, ensuring that democracy is protected here in the United States as well. But I want to ask about the movement first, because I've seen a bunch of questions in the Q&A that relate to just getting a sense of how large the movement is. You said the movement has grown since October 7th. So can you give us a sense of numbers and also of the composition in terms of Palestinians, citizens of Israel, Israeli Jews? And I would also want to hear about Rula, I'm going to ask you to answer this question, but also if you can touch on Palestinian partners in West Bank and Gaza. So Palestinian partners in Palestine versus Palestinian partners in Israel. And if you can talk a little bit about what type of relationships exist. So please, Rula.
Yeah, sure. Well, I would start by saying that, first of all, standing together is a movement that works within the borders of Israel. We work within our society, the Israeli society. I would say today we are the largest grassroots movement in Israel. And since the 7th of October, we've said that a lot. Like when people when we sat down with people and we started talking about what was happening and how we organize people, some people called us a bit crazy, that we still have some kind of a hope for change. And when we would talk to them about the numbers of how we grew as a movement, they were left, kind of puzzled, because they're seeing what's happening here. They're seeing what's happening in the Israeli society, which is becoming more radical. But still, we would say, listen, many people went to the right, but many people, also went to the left. And since the 7th of October, we have grown to reach approximately 6,000 members. And when I say members, I talk about, paying members to the movement. Before the war, I think we were around 4,000 members in Standing Together, and we have grown to become 6,000, which means we have grown in numbers, in people wanting to work within Standing Together, to be part of Standing Together, to speak the politics that Standing Together is speaking, which is stopping this war, ending the occupation, and going to political agreements and into Israeli-Palestinian peace. And regarding, the movement, Alon-Lee said we started at late 2015. Until the 7th of October, we had chapters all over the country. But after the 7th of October, because we had many people coming into the movement, and especially Palestinian students, from within Israel, I would say we don't do profiling, but when you sit in a room and you look at the people who are coming, I would say approximately 35% of the people in the movement who come, to our events, to the actions we do, to the demonstrations, any act we might do, I would say approximately 35% Palestinian citizens of Israel, and the rest, Jewish citizens of Israel, plus minus, because again, we don't really do profiling, we can't do that. But today we have 12 chapters all over the country, and we have 11 student chapters because of the actions we are doing. And today we are also, the biggest left force in the campuses. We have students after the 7th of October who ran to the, how do you call it in English, Alon-Lee?
The Students' Union.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that word. The Students' Union, and won, which means people, students voted, and students had coalitions with our students, and they wanted them to be in these unions. So we grew, we became bigger.
Just saying, we are the largest organized force right now in campuses in Israel, more than right wing and left wing. Standing Together is having the largest number of representatives in student union as an organized body, and we hold a few chair people of student unions across Israel, including Bezalel and the Hebrew University and so on.
Yes, and regarding your second question about partners, we don't organize people in the West Bank. And of course, we don't organize people in Gaza, because in Gaza, nobody can go to Gaza for the past 17 years. But we do have relationships with organizations such as Women of the Sun. I think that is the translation into English. Organizations and, different members or activists who are in the West Bank and working. But most of the work that we do is within the Israeli society. But if we go to the West Bank, and it's always after having connection with people from the West Bank who are, who welcomes us to come to any kind of demonstration, protective action. Like today, the Humanitarian Guard, I think, are in the south of Hebron because of because of the settler attacks on Palestinians in the south of Hebron. So that is the kind of relationships that we have.
Thanks, Rula. I want to ask about a development, and you spoke a lot about your presence in campuses. Obviously, I know that you're both aware of the situation within college campuses here, and the extreme polarization and tensions that and violence that has erupted in some, not all, campuses. And we, of course, as J Street, have a student organizing arm, J Street U, that is very much trying to create a space in which you can hold both the understanding that you can be both pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian at the same time. And, you know, voices like yours that are collectively lifting up the "and" are so important at these times that are so polarizing. But what we've seen, of course, in many campuses is even when you have Israelis and Palestinians or Jews and Muslims that are standing together on those campuses, there are continued forces that are hypercritical of them and are not in favor of seeing this shared presence and voice. And I know in February, a wing of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement called on followers to boycott your organization over normalization. And this is a phenomenon that we see with a lot of Israeli and Palestinian organizations that are working together on peace-building activities. What was your reaction? What would be your message also to people here in the United States that are trying to sort of re-emulate the role that you are playing within Israeli society? How have you reacted to this, and what advice do you have for us over here in the United States?
Literally our favorite topic to speak about, of course. But I would say, well, there are a few layers to this conversation, and the answer to how we perceive, how do we feel about the discussion internationally about Israel and Palestine, the role of the international left, the role of some pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian forces that are not here to really advance the life of Israelis or the life of Palestinians. And I will say that we are very disappointed many times in the last few months, or since this nightmare started, to see forces that are very far away from the situation, very far away from the land, very far away from the ability to experience the normal life here, the existence of what does it mean to wake up in the morning on this land when you're a Palestinian or when you're Jewish. What does it mean to be a Palestinian citizen of Israel? Maybe a lot of them do not even know that they are Palestinian citizens of Israel. I will risk and say that. And then they feel that they have the ability or the will to not only criticize forces on the ground that are trying to resist the status quo, to resist the war, to resist the occupation, to even maybe put their bodies, physical bodies, on the line in front of settlers, trying to protect aid. They also try to say that peace is not a solution. And then we ask them, so what is your solution? If you don't want to have peace, if you are against Israeli-Palestinian peace, what do you suggest? How do you suggest to end the killing? How do you suggest to stop the bloodshed? How do you suggest to protect Palestinians on this land? Is your fantasy that Jews are just going to disappear like this tomorrow morning and then all Palestinians will be safe? Nice fantasy, not going to happen. So what is your fantasy? That somehow, I don't know, there will be a Palestinian resistance movement, an armed one that is going to beat the IDF and everyone will be happy? Not only that, it's a not moral fantasy because innocent people will die as much as they died on October 7th. It is also not going to happen. Is your fantasy maybe that one day, I don't know, the president or the prime minister of India or the president of the US will wake up one morning and say, today is the day. I'm going to put all the pressure. I'm going to leave everything. And today is the day I'm going to save Israel and Palestine from themselves and to force peace upon this land. Also not going to happen. So the only strategy that can work is a strategy of the people living on this land, millions of Jews and millions of Palestinians, that none of them is going to disappear, even though there are fantasies of the right wing on this side and the right wing on this side, somehow living together and achieving peace between each other, achieving peace, and that means a diplomatic agreement between themselves. And that means we acknowledge the fact that Israel exists. even though it's a bit of a trend to not write even the name of Israel online. But it exists. We live here. That's our reality. And we accept this reality and we work from this reality to better and to advance the lives of both Palestinians and Jews living here, because these are our societies and we are deeply concerned and connected and loving our societies. And what we feel that those BDS and those extremely radical forces, they stopped caring about the changing of the reality. They care more about condemning reality. It's nice to condemn reality. I also like to curse reality. I see a lot of things that I want to curse, and it makes me sometimes feel good in my stomach that I took out something. But there's a very big change, very, very big difference between changing reality and condemning reality. It's not the same thing. It really is not the same thing. And I think that when I see also parts of the Jewish community in the US or in France or in the UK using the real existence of anti-Semitism that exists in some parts of those movements to try and dismantle the even slightest ability to stand in solidarity with Palestine or to stand in solidarity with Palestinians that are dying in tens of thousands right now in Gaza. This is arming anti-Semitism, and is actually, when you say that everything is anti-Semitism, maybe anti-Semitism becomes nothing. And it is very, very dangerous. Just the other day, I saw a page on Twitter with hundreds of thousands of followers, an American organization standing against anti-Semitism, a Jewish one, using a picture of a flight attendant, a flight attendant in Delta, to a flight to Boston that had a small pin of a Palestinian flag on his chest. And they said, maybe Jewish people are on this flight to Boston, dear Delta, and you're making them feel unsafe. And I'm sorry, if the Palestinian flag is making someone feel unsafe, it is their problem. It is not the problem of the Palestinian people or the people that are fighting for peace, because eventually Palestine will exist and Palestinians do exist. And this is the flag of the Palestinian people that we need to stand in solidarity with right now, as much as we need to stand in solidarity with Jewish people in Israel. So both sides, they have those ends that are very dangerous and they are raising the bars all the time. And what we need to remember is that the only ability to change and to stop this reality, to achieve safety and equality and existence to both Palestinians and Jews, is to advance towards an Israeli-Palestinian peace that will mean the end of the occupation, sure, the end of this war, sure, but it would also mean that every person on this land, including the Jews and including the Palestinians, will live safely, equally, and independently together.
Thank you, Alon-Lee. So well said. And Rula, I want to ask you another question. I also would welcome your reactions to the same topic. So I'll put that out as question number one. But just question number two was going back to this conversation about the pro-democracy movement and the fact that Standing Together led the anti-occupation bloc, which already, of course, prior to October 7th, had its own challenges in trying to understand or to explain the connection between threats to democracy and the perpetuation of the occupation. And so I wanted to know how you are continuing to make that connection, what challenges you might be experiencing today, or how are people responding potentially positively post-October 7th to that connection and to that message. So first, if you want to comment also on the question relating to anti-normalization and BDS, I welcome that. And to the next question about democracy and anti-occupation.
Yeah, of course. Well, I do want to relate to your first question a bit, because I am a Palestinian that has been, accused of normalizing. And to many people, as Alon-Lee have said, many people don't understand that 20% of the population of Israel are Palestinians. I am part of the Palestinians who were somehow didn't flee, were not killed at 1948, the ones who were able to come back. In many times we make a joke of it. We say we are the lucky ones who were able to come back and stay. But we are 20% of the population of Israel, and we hold that place with all of the complexities that it's with it. And normalizing is basically you know, it is the reality we wake up to each and every day. But it's also deciding each and every day when we wake up that we need to fight together this situation. And when we talk about fighting back and organizing people and mobilizing people in the streets, we're not talking about, you know, maintaining the situation we are within right now. Because inside of Israel, you know, Israel is not a democratic state. It was never a democratic state to the Palestinian citizens who live within Israel. When we talk about what we see and how we see the future and the vision and the fight we hold as a movement, it is not about going back to, you know, to the 6th, November the 6th. It's not. It's about creating a different ground. So it's about creating a place where, as Alon-Lee have said, both of us are equal, free, have liberation, and yes, we have independence because we deserve that independence. So when we talk about that future and that struggle, it's a struggle for stopping this war, ending the occupation on the West Bank, but also having a real equality to the citizens living inside of Israel. And that is the politics and the way we see the future and how we fight towards that future. Now, if some people want to call it normalization, you know, it's their choice. But for us, it's life. It's what we wake up to each and every day and still decide to fight against the forces that are much bigger than us. Now, when we talk about what's really happening and the anti-occupation, I think the message that we are holding, you know, today, a month ago, if you would say peace, people will laugh at you. Like when we talk about having a Israeli-Palestinian peace, most people within the Israeli society will tell you, what peace? With whom? Well, like, what are you talking about? With whom do you want to make peace? But what we hold in mind is, you know, we need a political imagination in the place that we live in. We are, you know, part also of a generation who has seen only one prime minister in Israel, who is still Bibi Netanyahu. And with that prime minister who's taking governments to be more right, extreme fascist governments, political imagination has become very narrow for people living within the Israeli society. When we want to bring people an alternative, that an alternative has to have a competition with the narrative that we have right now. This government is only speaking about more war, a war with Lebanon, conquering Gaza, you know, throwing 2.2 million Palestinians from Gaza. Now they're talking about they're having a war with Lebanon, conquering Lebanon, the whole, you know, idea of the big Israel. And if there is no competition to that idea, you know, people will feel abandoned. There's no real leadership to give any kind of alternative. And when people only hear one voice, that's the only voice they will be able even to follow. So you need to give an alternative. And that is the alternative we are speaking about. Now, one thing we know, and you know, we know because we see the reaction of people in the streets, is that what the Israeli society understands that we can't go back to the way it was before the 7th of October. The status quo cannot be maintained anymore. We can't manage the occupation. You can't live in a place where maybe sometimes once every 2 years you will have a round with Gaza, something will happen in the West Bank, something will erupt in Jerusalem, in Sheikh Jarrah, there will be demonstrations in here, some soldiers will die, more Palestinians will die also, and then we will continue our lives. It can't be maintained anymore. So when you speak about the real meaning of safety to people and the connection of that safety to the reality that Palestinians also deserve their own independence and stopping the military occupation and control over their lives, you make a connection in people's minds, and you understand that an occupation that is still on a whole nation, it doesn't make anyone of us free. Now, it's not an easy task. It's not like most people in here will tell you, yeah, we should end the occupation, because in the Israeli books, people don't learn about the occupation. There is no green line on the history books. When people look at the map of Israel in schools, you see, you know, Israel with the Golan Heights, with Gaza, and with the West Bank. So the work that's not must be done is much, you know, bigger, and it's gonna take much more time. But still, when we talk about the fact that maintaining this status quo, still having an occupation over a whole nation, will not bring us any difference, will not change the status that we are here. And the fact that maybe to some people, when you talk about, you know, this government had tried everything, but one solution hasn't been tried with this government, which is peace, which is going into negotiations and having real peace. And when you talk to the generation before us, they speak about the peace that was between Israel and Egypt, which was a very, you know, in the minds of people, a celebration that was done. So you need to bring people a political, you know, imagination to try to imagine how can this land really look when you don't have occupation anymore, and when you have real diplomacy and real agreements with the sides that who are your neighbors, and when in the south and also in the north.
Thanks, Rula. And I totally agree with the importance of education and education about the reality, both in the complexity within Israel, the reality of the occupation, the existence of a green line. These are all things that are so important to be educating about within Israeli society, but also so incredibly important to be educating about here in the United States when talking about Israel and Palestine. And so it is a large task, but we all do have our roles within our different societies to continue to educate about the reality on the ground. Our time is almost up, and one of the most frequent questions that I am receiving in the Q&A is, how can we support you? What does your movement need from the American community, particularly the American Jewish community, but just more broadly, if you can talk about how we can support you?
We'll state the obvious. Of course, we need financial support. Standing Together is growing. We need to sustain this growth. We need to be able to grow even more. We need to be able to face, I guess, the tough years that are coming ahead, and to be able to be ready for those challenges, and the right wing here that has a plan, that is trying to storm towards their plan of just more death and destruction. So we are actually right now on a fundraising campaign. If I don't know if you can see the chat, but Eliza just sent the link, and we are having an ambitious goal to try and really raise enough money to sustain the entire operation that we're building. So that's one thing. The second thing is we need the very active participation in a discussion, in a healthy way, a way that is saying we are taking the side of the people living here on this land. Being pro-Israeli people is being pro-Palestinian people. Being pro-Palestinian people necessarily means being pro-Israeli people. And even further than that, we need to put forward the message that supporting the Israeli people does not mean supporting the Israeli government or the official Israel right now. There is a very big widening gap between the Israeli people that are out on the streets for more than a year and a half now, demanding change, not accepting the most right-wing, furthest government in the history of Israel, a government of Jewish supremacy, a government of deepening the occupation, a government of trying to bring us more death and wars, and that is doing nothing actually to bring back the hostages. And, the people in Israel just wanting to have finally normal life, quiet life, a life of peace and prosperity. And I think this is, and I will take it a step further, that means that in the discussion of how to really support Israel and how really to support the Israeli people, it means that we also you need to put pressure on your elected officials, on your politicians, to say that we need to separate the people in Israel and the leadership in Israel. We cannot continue to blindly support Israel in everything this government is doing. We cannot give the aid without any conditions. Yes, we need to condition the aid to Israel. It is a healthy relationship. Giving a blank check to a practically fascist government is not something that we can tolerate. It does not help us in any way. So demanding this from your politician in an election year can be something extremely effective, and this will help us a lot.
Thanks, Alon-Lee. Rula, do you want to add anything before I close?
Well, I think Alon-Lee did sum it up, but I would say maybe because we've been to the US also after the 7th of October, and we've been to many different places. And I think one of like, we say that to people, we know what's been happening within communities, also within the Jewish community, the Palestinian community, the Jewish and Palestinian Arab community abroad. And we see that people are, taking side, which is something, people do at times of war. But we do ask you to understand that the right side is the side of the people living this reality in here, which is both Jews and Palestinian on this land. And by understanding that simple fact, you can really help us more by advocating for our lives and not for the governments that control us right now on both sides. Both leaderships. And I do think I do hope that channels of being able to speak together, to try to work together, to try to have, any kind of action together has become more possible. And if not, I think you can maybe speak about us. If we can still wake up in the morning with everything that's happening around, with the images that we see, with the society that we are trying to change and we live in, and we can still wake up and work and go out to demonstrations and fight together, I don't see a reason why you can do that. So if you need, to some kind of look on others, or to try to get some ideas. So we are also here to help with anything you need, but your voice is very important for us. So thank you so much for listening to us.
Thank you both. Truly, you definitely are a model for all of us. And of course, with, as J Street, as a political advocacy organization, Alon-Lee, your comments about the role of our community, of course, and being advocates for understanding that differentiation very much between the government and the people, and the governments and the people, right? I mean, the Palestinian governments and Israeli governments, and really focusing on that distinction. For us, a lot of comments in the chat. We know, of course, that Bibi Netanyahu is coming to speak at Congress at the end of this month. And that message is so important for members of Congress, but for everyone to understand, is that, yes, he is the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, but he is not all of the Israeli people. And you can stand with the Israeli people and not stand with the government, and you can be critical of the government, and that doesn't mean that you are not pro-Israel and pro-Israeli people. And likewise also for, Palestinian governments as well, and standing with the Palestinian people. So I really thank you both for your courage, for being with us, and for continuously sharing your vision, your messages of hope, but also for taking the courageous actions out in the field on a daily basis, with the continuous challenges that we are facing, and having you on the front lines is calming and also nerve-wracking in some sense, but it's good to know that we have allies like you that are really fighting the good fight, as they say, on the ground. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.